We on? Are we on? Is it happening? It's happening. Yay, we're here. We're on. We're broadcasting live. How you guys doing? Beautiful day. We got a little bit of nice low humidity for the day. We'll see how long that lasts. Probably not too long. But I'll take it while I can get it. Just went for a walk in the park. It was very nice. Went for an old stroll. Appreciate the work of good old Calvert Vaux and his buddy Frederick Law Olmsted. Did a good job. Is this berry LaCroix? Yes. I generally prefer black cherry. I think that's the goat seltzer flavor. That's number one, but a lot of the time it's not in my bodega or my kitchen, or my grocery store, so I get what's available. Yes, I would say top three are black cherry, watermelon, and berry. Polar is very good. That's usually what I get, but they didn't have any hard cherry, and I really like that one. Not a fan of the grapefruit. So, I wanted to start today talking about something that popped up in the old discourse. Once again, I apologize for referencing the internet. It's tough, but at the same time, trying to talk about things, and given my limited little space, there's very little I could report on in my life that's very relevant. So I kind of have to stay at that level for now. I don't think forever, but right now, I'm feeling still kind of, we're still in a loose quarantine, but in one that sees me not really interacting that much with the world, certainly in a political sense. But damn it, there's always something to talk about on that internet. And I like to think that for the most part, I just use it as an entryway to talk about something that's more abstract and applicable beyond that narrow aperture. So there was an article in Jacobin about how the U.S. has incredibly draconian open container laws, and it's stupid, and people should be able to drink in public like adults, like we do in most other countries. And to me, that seems like very, very obvious, very self-evident thing. I mean, and if you wanted to be super woke about it, if you wanted to be 1619 Project about it, you could talk about how, wow, why does America have such more stringent open container laws than, say, Europe? It's because they're another way to police minority communities. And there's something to that. And yet, there was a backlash to that article about people getting mad and saying, look at these bourgeois gentrifiers just complaining because they want to pretend like they're in Berlin and be able to drink outside. Ooh, fucking Fauntleroy's. Why should I care? Fuck that. Have the cops tase them so that I don't have to see their frat antics. Now, part of that, that's a baffling response. And once again, hate to talk about the internet, but I think that the nature of that response, which seems on its face to be so shocking, reveals a lot of things, not just about the dynamic online, but about the dynamic of the American left in general. And first of all, you've got the fact that for some people, they hate Jacobin because they have an esoteric problem with it as a project, and they're going to hate everything, and they just pull something out of a hat. So that's one group. You don't really have to consider them too much. Another group are people on the left for whom being on the left means if I'm on the left and I have a strident enough voice, and certainly if I press the identity politics buttons in the right direction, people have to talk to me. People have to acknowledge me. People have to be my friend. And that's a big thing on the left, is a lot of the discourse, especially about interpersonal stuff within organizations, DSA for example, boils down to it's problematic or it's reactionary to not be my friend. And for those people, especially the ones who have been so successful at having friends, seeing people talk about things like public drinking gets them furious because it reminds them of all the fun they don't have. And they want to remind people, no, this is the left. This is where you listen to me, because it's the only social situation where anyone would listen to me by their own volition, because they've convinced themselves that I have something to say. But in reality, I am just a wildly unpleasant person to be around, and has decided that that's actually the world's fault, and exert that by getting angry at anyone who would raise an issue that would only apply to people who aren't neurodivergent, problematic, having enough spoons, having the spoons to drink. Like, some people don't have the spoons to drink, and you're ignoring all of us spoonless people, which that's just personal invective. This is just personality disorder masked as politics. And then there's this last group, which I think is kind of the most interesting, and that is people who, they read that and they don't think about the obvious person that this is referring to in terms of, talking about real social oppression. They're talking about this as something that makes society less free, less just, something that makes it harder to be a minority, harder to be poor in this country. But that's not who they think of when they read that. They immediately think of the people who wrote it and the people who are reading it. And the people who wrote it and the people who are reading it are all members of that same downwardly mobile urban PMC that is generally, in my opinion, the constitutive body of the self-conscious left in America. Not necessarily everyone who has leftist beliefs, but I'm talking about the self-identified left. And so they read that and think, oh, you Jacobin fucking brocialists, you just want to be able to have a beer kegger in front of your gentrifying ass brownstone that your parents bought you. Fuck you. And the thing is that seems insane. Hey, who are you talking? We're talking about the real people who suffer from this are mostly working class urban minorities. But since that's not who wrote it, and that's not who's reading it, including the people who are bad, the people who hated the article, none of them are. They're all the same group. They're all the same group, and they end up fighting a battle. I mean, it's trivial, but like, it creates battle lines that are generated by just this stew of personality-based resentments. And that's why politics is a dead letter. Because you have a perfectly good policy that could be something that could unite people across urban neighborhoods, from the gentrified areas to the not yet to be, against police authority in their lives. But people got to get self-conscious about the cultural implications of it, because only one group is being talked about, and that creates anxiety. Everyone knows that there's no diversity in this movement, that it doesn't include basically any poor people of any kind, very few poor minorities, almost no poor white people. And once again, when I'm talking about the self-consciously identified left, which, as I'm saying, is also mostly an online phenomenon. And so this thing just spins off on its own with no connection that would ground it and make this question irrelevant to anybody who even thought about it for a second. Because all that personal shit would just dissolve in the reality. But there is no reality, because this is not a genuine working class emanation. And I understand actually why people want to fight on the cultural ground. Not just because it's something they can do, but Gramsci had a real meaningful contribution to Marxism when he noted the function of hegemony in the culture, because there's a certain sterility to the base superstructure dynamic. Because if it's just that, right? If it's just you've got an economic base that determines the presiding cultural values and ideas of a society that then filter through all institutions, how could anything ever change? Like, even if things get worse, that worseness is going to be diffused and transformed by culture into its opposite, and then society will maintain its structures. And the answer is what Gramsci identified as counter-hegemony, whereby working class people create their own dense social network that is essentially resistant to the overall hegemony, and over time can defeat it in the battle for the majority of people's mind space, the war of positions, he called it. And that's real. That's a real thing, and that's a real phenomenon. And certainly in the post-capitalist West, that's the reality of the terrain of social struggle, considering how few people self-identify as leftists. But the problem there is that in that analysis, to look at the culture as is, and specifically the culture of something like, I don't know, the online left, and you see that as an emanation of counter-hegemony. But it's not. It's not part of a counter-hegemony. It is part of the ruling hegemony, because it is not a working class movement. It's not a working class cultural movement the way that the Social Democrats in Germany built, especially the way that the Communist Party of Italy did after World War II. Like, that was genuine. Those were genuine counter-hegemonic movements, because what Marx theorized to happen, and what you saw happen in the satanic mill towns of post-industrial revolution Europe, is that the density and the similarity of social conditions and the geographic closeness of working class communities meant that there was, like, as society emanated, trickled, as hegemonic concepts trickled down through social institutions to the working class, counter-hegemonic notions were rising up from the connection between people in the workplace, which because they were closer to the ground, have more power, and over time can create institutions and enduring cultural structures that are counter-hegemonic. And that is not what we have right now. What we have right now is a left that is one specific segment of the broader, you couldn't even call it working class. It's not, it's partial, because the thing is, the job is less significant than the cultural framework, because it's self-limiting. What it means is that this is not a phenomenon that expresses a counter-hegemonic working class American culture. It represents a very specific subcultural emanation within a broader social media cultural hegemony, not counter-hegemony. Working class culture, on the other hand, is a broad one, is essentially a dead letter because of the way that geography and the workplace and labor in America has broken up relations, turned us from potatoes in the sack to Pringles in a tube. And the challenge is to actually build genuine working class cultural institutions. And that's very difficult, because everyone who is self-consciously in the matrix of opinions and actions that form, the left, are almost inherently broken away from it. And I mean, this is another one where I don't really know the answer, but I just know that the holes we've been trying to draw water from are fucking dry. I've actually been watching not old SNL episodes, but I've got YouTube on my TV, and sometimes I'll just, for a little bit, put on random old sketches. Not that old, recent ones, because I only see them once. The older sketches I sort of have emblazoned in my head from watching them on Comedy Central as a kid a bunch of times. But the more recent ones I watch, because they just go in one ear and out the other, and I've just kind of reappraised them and go, wow. Yeah, no, it's bad. It's bad. It's as bad as it's ever been. It's the same thing as ever, and yet somehow worse than it's ever been. Isn't that what Felix says about America, and isn't it the most true thing that's ever been said? About everything you could say, this is basically what it's always been quality-wise, and yet somehow worse. And that is SNL. Do I identify as based? Carbon-based. Nice. I should get that for a T-shirt. I gotta get a T-shirt that says, "Yes, I'm based, carbon-based," and just do the biggest soy face in human history. Put it all over the internet. Ah! I think I've given my opinions on anarchism in here before, that it's essentially like hyper-liberalism. It's liberalism taken to its most socially radical, or like it's liberalism taken to its most radical conclusions, but at the end of those conclusions. And that's still just the end of liberalism, whereas what you need is something other than liberalism. Yeah, there must be a deeper meaning behind ironic soy facing. I think that's interesting because I remember after the right-wing guys, after the alt-right guys invented soy face and people started doing it ironically, they get really mad. They'd be like, just because you're doing it ironically doesn't mean you're not really one. And you're actually doing it ironically because you know deep down that you're soy. And the thing is like, I mean, it's a tautology. It's like they've just said everything I don't like is soy. Well, it's like, well, I don't care if you don't like me. You suck. Sure, I'm soy. Whatever. I don't care. Like your values are bad. I'm glad that I don't adhere to them. But it's just fun. I gotta say, I gotta give them that. Why aren't I vegan? Give me a break. Give me a time. I'm on a fucking process here. Okay, I've been a hedonic slug my entire life. It's not gonna be a 180. I'm not gonna turn on a dime. If I tried, it would break. I'd snap in half like a twig. But I think I'm on a good path. I think I will get there someday. Why is the K-Hive so psycho? That's a good question. I was thinking about that today because some friends and I were talking about the Veep stakes, and about how, Biden's he painted himself into the corner with this black woman thing, and, it's probably bad that he doesn't feel like he has more variety. And then somebody said, it would be hilarious if he picked Mitt Romney. And the thing is that he's not really restrained to pick a black woman because, according to the vast majority of these people, who will really care, like obviously for most people, VP picks are meaningless. This is really just about like shaping narrative and keeping your most motivated volunteer type people and like leading edge voters excited. It's not going to matter to the general public, but all these people who say who are now like he's got to pick a black woman and all that. If he doesn't, they are on record without anything to do because they have said explicitly that they will not abandon him because of the importance of beating Trump, which means that he could pick anybody. He could pick Chris Dodd, guy who's basically a clone of him. He could pick Hunter. He could pick Mitt Romney. And what are they going to do about it? What are you going to do? Forget about it. Get out of here. Get your fucking shine box. And I think that's true of most of these people, but it is not true of the K-Hive. I think the K-Hive would actually not only not vote for Biden, but some of them might try to take a shot at him because they are the people who have essentially become identity politics Wahhabists, where they have gathered all of their political meaning, like the good and evil, and their personal investment in politics, their identity as a political agent, as someone trying to shape their lives and destinies and the future of their families and their species, around a very specific ideological matrix, around which, with brittle to non-existent ideology underlying it, and as such, they're not going to take. That's the one thing that will make them the thing. They might have told everyone else, hey, suck it up, beating Trump is too important. But I think for a small group of them, they would actually do some Puma shit if she didn't get it. But from the point of view, if I'm Biden, these are an insignificant number of people. And Harris, I think, honestly, would be a bad pick. I mean, not only I think it'd be funny if he didn't pick her, but I also think he could do better. Like that Karen Bass or something. I honestly I'm kind of now of the opinion that like a relatively unknown black female congresswoman would be the best pick because it would be something people could talk about that wasn't Trump or Biden, because they're stuck in a thing where, you want to be able to define yourself. You need to have some sort of positive, shape to your campaign. You can't completely rely on your opponent shitting the bed. I mean, you can mostly do it, and you can try to do it, but I think people assume there are limits, and I think people are going to act with the assumption that there are limits to that. And so you want to have something positive to talk about your campaign. And like if they roll out hey, meet this person, and it's somebody who basically nobody had heard about a week ago, becoming an overnight celebrity. That's the kind of thing that could actually hold a news cycle or two. You know, I mean, I don't think it will, given how the Cuisinart of sensory overload we live in, but it could. Certainly more than him picking Kamala Harris. Old news. She ran it. Boo. It's all. Immediately they go to, ooh, what about the time in the debate they fought and all that tedious shit? And what about her being a cop? Blah, blah, blah. You don't gain anything. It's just another, it's somebody who's already out, who's been in the deck, brought back out. Oh, yeah, we know that. Boo. You got to bring in someone new, someone flashy, someone to get people going, get the people moving. And like with Trump being the nominee, with Biden being the avatar of Wall Street experience, if not competence, since sure people know that his brain's melting, but at least they don't think that he's not, you know, that he doesn't know where the fucking bathroom is and that kind of thing, just unless he's forgotten. So I don't think there's any real danger of people being like, oh, she's not very qualified. I mean, who's president, for Christ's sake? I think it immediately becomes, here's a new person, and so many people can form beliefs around, people they can make memes over, a way to sort of launder this dog shit dead carcass of a campaign into something animated. So, yeah, fuck it. Karen Bass, go for it. Val Denning, somebody like that. Whoever you think is like going to get them in front of a focus group, and whoever lights up the dials most, pick. Just something to talk about that isn't Biden, that isn't Biden's I mean, my God, you guys saw, I hope everyone saw him today, one of his best moments yet of the campaign, where he had everything in him, everything in it that is bad, everything that is evidence of his manifest mental incompetence in 1 minute-long segment. Let me play it right now if anybody hasn't heard it. This is genuinely amazing.
Vice President, your opponent in this election, President Trump, has made your mental state a campaign topic. And when asked in June if you've been tested for cognitive decline, you've responded that you're constantly tested.
Constantly. Guys are coming at him. He's got to do judo chops. He's got to evade attackers. He's got to do mind combat. Here we go.
Why the hell would I take a test? Come on, man.
Come on, man.
That's like saying before you got in this program, if you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not, what do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
Are you a junkie?
To President Trump,
are you a junkie?
Who brags about his and makes your state an issue for voters.
Ah, hell. God damn it. Oh, here we go.
Well, if he can't figure out the difference between an elephant and a lion, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Did you watch that? Look, come on, man. I know you're trying to goad me, but, I mean, I'm so forward looking to have.
I'm so forward to looking
to sit with the president.
Sit to or stand with or either one, whatever one do it.
And by the way,
here it is. This is my favorite part.
You know, I shouldn't say it. I'm going to say
no, never mind.
I probably shouldn't say it.
Should say it.
Anyway,
here we go.
I am very willing to let the American public judge my physical and mental as well as my mental fitness.
He botches physical and mental fitness twice in a row, like he's a fucking Studebaker you're trying to start. You couldn't write it better. He is funnier than Trump at this point, because Trump, you kind of get it. Get him in there. Get the new funniest possible thing. Felix is once again correct. He truly is a shaman. He just feels the vibrations. I'm out here trying to piece this shit together with like these stupid specific concepts and symbolic orders, and he's just like, he's reading the wind. His kneecap starts twitching, and he understands the direction of the cosmic winds. But yeah, funniest outcome, because we're in a period of disruption, and comedy comes from surprise, from the unexpected, and we're living in an era of extrapolating and compounding shocks to the system. So of course it's going to be funny. And now this is who we get to be as president for anywhere from I'm going to say 18 to I think he might make it. I think the over-under on should he make it past the midterms. Although maybe he'll keep living. Maybe he is going to be one of those old guys whose lights go out, but he stays alive for years. God, that'd be a nightmare. But also, in its own horrifying way, kind of funny. Come on, man. Physical and mental fitness. Goddamn beyond everything, Ed Tom. Goddamn beyond everything. Well, I mean, they worship senility because they're senile. The electorate is old people. They want to see themselves represented. Like Trump is them, so is Biden. Just different versions. The ones who are accepting their decline and the ones who are raging against the dying of the light. But it's still the same group. Same old people watching TV, and they're picking which one of these old fucks they relate to more. Someone asked if Nixon in '60, if he'd won, if it would have changed it would have prevented the Southern realignment, the racial realignment on civil rights. And I gotta say, I don't think so. Nixon wasn't like certainly wasn't a civil rights like firebrand in any way. The real interesting thing is that the interesting question about civil rights is to what a massive degree the assassination of JFK broke a logjam there that might otherwise have not been defeated. And it raises a question of, like, absent that, how do you... Because the Kennedys had no idea how to deal with those old crackers in Congress who were bottling it up using all the procedural tricks they learned from generations at the Cracker Barrel. Your Howard Smiths and your Richard Russells, they were eating their fucking lunch. And Johnson had an idea, but they didn't want to hear that fucking dipshit. They hated him. They had all the Harvard degrees, so they knew it was better. And they were just absolutely buffaloed. And it was the assassination of Kennedy that kind of broke the logjam on civil rights. And of course, you wouldn't, I mean, if Nixon's president, you still have the Southerners resisting. I don't know. I don't know how you get out of the logjam. I had a fun idea for a counterfactual history there where Nixon wins, right? And when the Bay of Pigs happens, see, the thing with Kennedy was essentially in the dark about the Bay of Pigs. When he came in, they said, we've got an operation to defeat, to go in and knock over Castro easy peasy with an army. Like we did in Guatemala, it'll be no sweat. And Kennedy basically said, all right, go for it. And the planners created a plan that really could only have any chance of working with U.S. military air intervention. It was not going to be feasible for them to actually, I mean, in the delusioned halls of power, some of these guys, maybe even Wisner, I'm not sure, believed, oh, as soon as they show up, the masses will rise up and overthrow Castro. But the more hard-headed realists knew that the Cuban, the response was robust enough that without air support to stop the moving in of heavy weapons to repel the invasion, they were not going to make it. But they didn't tell Kennedy that because they didn't want him to say no. They were operating off the better to ask for forgiveness than permission model, thinking that, well, if we start this thing and it goes south, he's going to be pot committed and he's going to say, go for it. Which, of course, that's a bad way to go about planning a thing. And sure enough, when it came time for the invasion, it was getting repelled, and they say, hey, so we really could use some air support. And Kennedy said, fuck no. What was air support? I thought this was going to be easy and deniable. And then he made the laudable choice to just cut bait then and there. Of course, some could say that's where his death warrant was signed, depending on your view on it. As I said, at this point, after reading about it a lot, I am agnostic. It just feels good. I like floating in that liminal JFK space. It's just like in a jacuzzi of what ifs, and possibilities, and conjectures without any kind of solidified consensus. I like just knowing all that stuff and just letting it flow around me instead of hardening into prepositions. and suppositions. But Nixon, on the other hand, was the person at the White House who was the point man for the planning for the Bay of Pigs invasion, which had started under Eisenhower. Bay of Pigs was already being planned before the election, and Nixon, as VP, was directing it. It's easy to imagine a counterfactual where Nixon's president and is more invested in Bay of Pigs at an operational level and more committed to the concept of it, so that if he was in charge when the invasion happens, not only does he authorize airstrikes, they're already baked into the plan because he's signed off on the concept. Or even if not that, when they ask him, he gives the green light because he believes he has ownership more of it. He feels like it's his thing. I mean, a big part of it with Kennedy is they just stuffed that in his face, and he said, "What? I'm on the hook for something that I didn't even authorize." And that's one of the big reasons he didn't want to commit too much. This was Nixon's baby. And so what if there's a successful incursion that, gets past the beachhead at the Baja de Cochino, and it stalls out, and then the next step is an investment of U.S. Boots on the ground. And instead of Vietnam in the late 60s, you have Cuba in the early 60s. And with a hardening of a social conflict accelerating, in the absence of a civil rights resolution, you have a more violent and more chaotic and polarizing, even than in reality, civil rights movement and anti-war movement. I don't know. Just messing around with it a little bit. I have no idea. But the other thing is that Nixon was also, a triangulator, and he was a pragmatist. So there's a question of, would he have been the guy who tamped down Cold War tensions? After all, he was the guy who, Kennedy ran to his right on China and on missiles. But the thing is, I think guys like Nixon kind of view the great power shit, like the stuff between the big guys, on a different level than things like knocking over some tin pot dictator. And at that point, remember, Castro had just taken power. He was not this fixture in human society. He was an arriviste. Knocking that guy off, I don't think he necessarily would have considered it like terribly, especially in our own backyard. I don't think he necessarily would have considered it a huge provocation to the Soviets. Just keeping your house in order. But yeah, I always imagine then, so Nixon's term is just like this hyper-reactionary turn, and then he has George Wallace as his running mate in 1964. Why somebody keeps asking me about The Social Network, and I gotta say, that's a movie that I have very few opinions on. I never really got it. I watched it in the theater at the time it came out, and I thought, okay. And it's never been a favorite of mine, but it's got stuff that's okay in it. I don't know. The fixation on it is either really good or really bad. I don't really get. Someone says Oliver Stone's W is good. I have to disagree on that one. That is a terrible film in my opinion. It's essentially a bunch of filmed Daily Kos articles from 2004. I guess I have one question. I guess someone asked me about the Uyghur deal, and I know a lot of people say like, oh, the whole thing is an op. It's all like a CIA operation to provoke a new Cold War. And I certainly buy the logic, the political logic anyway, of a new Cold War. But as I understand, as I said, I think that that real conflict between the United States and China is due to short-sightedness and just an inability to kind of smooth out some of the inherent bumps in transitioning to like a globalized supply chain, and are kind of, from a market perspective, not terribly rational. But in the short term, in both countries, there's, I think, significant political capital to be garnered from an escalating Cold War. The thing I don't get is, at this late date, I mean, who the fuck cares about human rights? I mean, I get, yeah, Iraq War, right? Yeah, like, that was the big liberal intervention, right? That was the big, that was saving Iraq and the poor Kurds from poison and stuff. I mean, Trump ran on, fuck the rest of the world, we'll shoot whoever we want. Built, like, everyone's been freaking out about cages on the border for 4 years. Nothing's been done about them. Why the what vanishingly small percentage of people gives a shit in this country about anybody's human rights, including their own fucking fellow citizens? And I get, oh, it's for the NGO crowd. It's for the NGO crowd. It's for the journalists. I'm sorry, if you still think those people are shaping opinions, I mean, if it is an op, it's one of the lowest return ops I can imagine. That's all. I don't know. I mean, Trump's on the record. When Xi explained to him what they were doing with the Uyghurs, he said, that's a great idea. That's what you should be doing. Somebody asked an interesting question. Somebody said, what about film under communism? Obviously, this is an absurd question because, I mean, talk about missing the forest for the trees. We're pretty far away from anything other than galloping disaster in every direction. It's silly to talk about something as pie in the sky as that, but I think it's an interesting idea just because I talk a lot about, how art is warped over time by capitalism. And what would that look like in its absence? And part of me thinks, so you've got the simple fact that technology is accelerated to such an extent that the ability to like make something, a film specifically, will be democratized, presumably, because the technology to the actual capacity, the actual material necessary to make a movie is distributed. But the thing is, if anybody can make a movie, then which one should I see? And that's where the market comes in as like the creator of a gatekeeping effect, which people hate gatekeepers, but I'm sorry, certain things, certainly aesthetics, require gatekeeping, or else people are never going to be able to engage with any kind of art form productively, because they're not going to be able to seek things out, because how are they supposed to know what even starts being good? And that's where the market used to stand in. Like, what people could get money for is what was good. And of course, that's bad. That's a bad rubric, and it's distorting, but it also does create the capacity to make large-scale entertainments that are genuinely engaging. And it's hard to imagine something in the absence of that. And I kind of think there would be sort of a two-tiered filmmaking the way there is now, but instead of around high and low budget, it would be like local. Like I could honestly imagine like movie making becoming a regional production, like a collaborative thing for in like communities or areas, you know, where people come together to do something and then they all watch it together. And then like that's where and then the selection process becomes who you actually made the movie with, you know? And it's not just seeing the thing, it's making the thing. Like local theater, exactly. But, you know, there's still a limit there to scale and grandiosity that who would want to lose that, you know? And then I would imagine it would have to be you'd need some sort of gatekeeping operation to accumulate and coordinate action, really, and accumulate the material, the capital to make it. Not capital, but whatever, the human and material resources. Maybe it'd be democratic. Maybe people would like pitch their ideas. People would vote on them. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was the last great movie, someone says. I will say this. I'd say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was the last movie. It was a great movie. And I think but I think you could even say it might be like the last movie. We'll see. But it might mark the end of an entire type of filmmaking, which, considering its subject matter, is just so perfect that I kind of want it to be true even if it's not, because it's so tidy. Someone's asking for sound drops. I think we might be able to get that in the future. If we move to the studio, like I'm hoping we can do soon, I would like to get some sound drops and maybe a soundboard of some kind. Get a little zoo crew. Oh, someone says people will put sound drops in. Nothing that none of you people can do. No. I will control them. No. Surely, you can't be serious. Allowing the groundlings. No. No, just the soundboard for me, where I get to press buttons and make funny noises. GeoGuessr. That's a good idea. I would do a GeoGuessr stream. I'm not very good at that game, but it could be fun. I'm usually not that good at it because my computer was kind of slow and it would take too long to like get to the identifying stuff, and I would lose patience. But maybe I could take more seriously. Children and Men's great. One of the best movies of the 21st century for sure. Mallrats or Clerks? I actually say Mallrats. Mallrats is a solid movie all around. It's an actual kind of movie. I like Clerks a lot, honestly. I mean, it was formational as a kid, but I think Mallrats was really good. You know, I'm noticing a lot of you people ask me for my takes on things, but you put it in a very leading way where you clearly want me to confirm your take on something. That's very clever. I see you doing it, though. Don't think I don't see it. Cheeky monkeys. Thoughts on how I'm cool? I don't smoke. Someone's asking if I've smoked cigarettes. I've never smoked. Come from a family of smokers, hardcore smokers. Never liked it. Sir, all right, the Sarah Cooper thing. So there was an article today in Mick about, or Mike, I don't know, about how boomers love the Sarah Cooper limp sync videos, but millennials and Zoomers think that it's laundering fascism or something. And I didn't read it, but just the fact that it was phrased that way, it was disheartening because it reminded me of how because politics is so fully fused with popular culture and entertainment, that you can't not like anything now for non-political reasons. Like if a thing is bad, it has to be politically bad. It can't just suck. And the fucking lip sync lady sucks. It's very, very bad. Maybe one video is kind of funny, but doing it again and again, it's absolutely baffling. And not since Eric Garland had the fucking game theory tweet get retweeted by a bunch of people fawning over it have I been more baffled by seeing people, including some people that I have some kind of respect for, going, this is so funny. And I was just like, what, where does that come from? And the thing is, it's not because it launders. Oh, it's like it makes Trump's fascism clownish. Like, I'm sorry if you can't see the clownishness of this situation, or the degree to which clownishness is inherent in fascism, and it can't really be teased out. And also, like, what's the bad part about this? Like, you see her do the lip syncing, and you're like, oh, I was going to overthrow capitalism or whatever, but now I'm just going to laugh at this video. What is that thought here? It's a lady doing a lip sync of Trump. That's all it is. It's lame. What? Why? I don't know anything about Hassan being called by the NSA. What do you want me to say? Please don't yell at me in the chat. Until I have someone reading these, I have to like do it myself, and it's enervating to be assaulted with news and demands for takes in large print over and over again. I mean, I think if people want, obviously all the shit with Antifa and the government like calling it a terrorist organization and investigating people out of it is fucked up, but god damn it, it would be easier to fight it if fewer people acted like that was a real thing too, and act like Antifa is real, like that it's an actual group of people and that it has leadership and that any of that shit is true. I mean, when you see this shit happen with Antifa, it really clarifies the whole like Power of Nightmares thesis about Al-Qaeda, that it was essentially made up by the Bush administration, that it never really existed in any form that people popularly understood it to, according to what they saw in the media. And you know, it took a while for people to realize that because they didn't have the context of, you know, Middle Eastern politics and terrorism and stuff to realize, oh, this guy was basically just giving out grants. Like, there was no real internal organization here. It wasn't like Spectre or something. And like with Antifa, that's a thing that you know is something people have understanding of, and happens. Like, they've seen it. They've seen the phenomenon in their lives, and they know it's not real. And yet, some people, like Al-Qaeda, like being called real. Like Al-Qaeda, they got off when Bush turned them into this evil organization. And I think there's a similar impulse to be like, yeah, we are this thing. Like, because that's going to raise you up. But then look what it's used to do. It's used to justify spurious fucking federal investigations and crackdowns. Jake Paul having his mansion raided. Man, hell of a day. That was a whole squad. Is he starting a militia? I think that would really be cool if he was starting a militia. Someone wants me to tell them if Bismarck or Metternich were worse. That's a bad word to use when you're talking about historical figures. That axis of moral judgment applies to them internally, but is relatively irrelevant to my analysis of them from history, from decades away. I mean, Bismarck did help unify Germany more directly, and unified Germany was a very bad idea. But at the same time, nobody really knew what it was going to lead to. Nobody knew what all those compound words were doing to their heads. I mean, I guess what trait are you trying to examine? Like personal morality or immorality? I think that's kind of irrelevant. Like, what effects are you trying to determine? And then, like, the question should be built around that. Because I just don't know how to answer, like, good or bad for bad, like, evil people. Honestly, even when they talk about, like, evil as dictator or whatever, it's like, oh, he killed 20 million people, he killed 30 million people. It's like, well, yeah, but if you'd switch them, it probably would have been different numbers. This is one of the big reasons I've never been down on the idea that James Buchanan is the worst president. Because if you had switched him and Franklin Pierce, they would have had the exact same presidencies, basically. Because they came from the exact same dough-faced, conciliatory Northern Democratic tradition. They were upholding the same, at that point, no longer sustainable, but still delusionally held by people at the highest levels of government, Democratic Northern bargain of giving the South whatever they want to keep the peace. And that's what Buchanan was doing. I mean, we look back on it and people call him a traitor for just giving up all those armories and forts to the insurgents. But Pierce would have done it too. That was giving shit to the fucking Southerners to keep them quiet, was what Northern Democrats did to keep power. So to me, they're interchangeable. Same thing with all the evil dictators. Like, it's the resources and the populations that they controlled dictated how many people they killed. Yeah, and if you want to talk about, like, competent, I mean, Metternich got driven out of Vienna by a mob, and Bismarck never had that happen. Why did I say that my fans betrayed me? I don't think I did. If I did, that might have been a joke. I don't think I ever said that seriously. It'd be a weird thing to say. If I said that, that would disturb me because it means I'm in some sort of a megalomaniacal fugue. I think Omar will win. I honestly, I don't know. I think people are just kind of flinching so much. Like, I think people thought that Rashida was in more trouble than she probably ever was, because they're just they're used to getting their asses kicked. But the thing about like high-profile congressmen is they tend to be popular, unless they get in trouble for like specific stuff that is antithetical to the party base that they have. Like, having name recognition is a huge percentage of the battle for any congressman. As soon as you have a certain amount of real estate and people know you in a district, you don't really lose ever. And getting a high profile early is a good way to have that process accelerate. And the stuff that people think is like awful for Omar or whatever, I don't think actual people in that district give a shit. I think that for a long time, like the whole Zionist apparatus had the ability to sort of sneak in their agenda as like a parcel of other ideas, and their shit kind of just got put in without being considered. And now the people are actually directly challenging it. They have to defend it on the merits and try to provoke conflict on the issues themselves, which basically boil down to allowing Israel to do whatever it wants in its nightmare apartheid state. And Americans don't care enough to like do anything to stop us from contributing to that, but they also don't care enough to vote for somebody who's opposed to it. And I think that's what's being slowly and horrifyingly understood in the halls of power. Is that, oh shit, like if this is no longer just a situation where there's an exercised minority who love Israel and everyone else kind of doesn't care, if there's even, a residual support for confronting Israel, it's going to be hard to dislodge, because how the hell do you argue that as its own discrete issue? Yeah, exactly. Apathy works both ways. Like, apathy is why we're not going to get a change to U.S. policy in Israel, but apathy is also why, if you have a few brave congresspeople who are willing to not toe the line on Israel, it's harder for Israel to, if they don't have anything else that's controversial, pin that on them as a reason for them to be voted out by their own constituents, who otherwise might like and respect them. All right, I'm gonna log off in a second here. One more question, guys. I'm gonna crack another LaCroix. All right, this is a good question. Best SNL Weekend update anchor. The obvious hipster answer is Norm Macdonald, so I'm not even going to say that because it's too odd on the nose. I'm just going to go with my my childhood gut with a guy I used to really, really like, and not because he was funny, but because he used to make me feel smart. Because if I got the reference, I felt like a little good boy because I was a fucking insufferable nerd. Dennis motherfucking Miller. Respect. Respect to the god. Colin Quinn, gotta be worst. Him and Charles Rocket probably, but oh my god, Colin Quinn was terrible. Just the worst person they could have picked for that job. They clearly like panicked after Norm got fired, and just, it's almost like they grabbed him from like drinking like a short dog with fingerless gloves in front of the 30 Rock and put him on the set. It was kind of amazing. Just muttering his way, stumbling through every joke. It was amazing. All right, guys. I'm peacing out. See you tomorrow, hopefully.